The librarian's name tag said Denise, and her hand was shaking when she slid the book back across the counter toward me. I hadn't expected that. I'd expected nothing, actually. I'd folded the note so small and tucked it so deep between pages 142 and 143 of a Maeve Binchy paperback that I almost convinced myself no one would ever find it, that it would ride the return cart into the back room and get shelved again, unread. My last attempt at being heard, buried between two chapters of a stranger's fiction. But Denise had found it, and now she was looking at me like she was afraid I might disappear if she blinked. "Mrs. Halverson," she said, keeping her voice low, the kind of low you use in a church or a hospital. "Can you come back here with me for just a moment? I want to show you our new large print section." I glanced over my shoulder. My daughter-in-law was in the parking lot, sitting in the driver's seat of that silver Tahoe, thumbing her phone. She'd given me 11 minutes. That's what she said when I asked how long I could stay. 11 minutes, Ruth. I've got errands. Like an hour at the Carroll County Public Library would have killed her. I nodded at Denise and followed her past the periodicals, past the children's section where a little boy was stacking board books into a tower, into a back corner where the carpet smelled like old paste and the fluorescent light buzzed overhead. She handed me the note. My own handwriting stared back at me, trembling and small. "Please help. I'm being kept. Cannot call. Daughter-in-law waits outside. Name is Ruth Halverson, 418, Sweet Gum Lane. Husband dead. Son dead. No one checks on me anymore. Please, please, please." "Ruth," Denise whispered, "I'm going to call someone. I need you to stay here with me. Can you sit down? There's a chair right here." My knees gave out before I decided to sit. The chair caught me. Denise put her hand on my shoulder and I made a sound I hadn't made since the morning they told me my Daniel was gone. A small broken sound. The sound of a person who'd been holding her breath for so long, she'd forgotten what air tasted like. "I'm here," Denise said. "Ruth, I'm here." Outside, the Tahoe's horn honked once, short and sharp. 11 minutes was up. Let me tell you how I got there, to that chair, to that whispered hallway, to the end of a rope I didn't know I'd been walking for almost 2 years. My husband Walter passed on an ordinary Tuesday in March of 2023. He went out to the garden to check on the tomatoes he'd started under grow lights in February, and he sat down on the bench by the basil and he just didn't get up. The paramedic told me it was his heart, that it had probably been going for weeks without telling him. Walter was the kind of man who wouldn't have told himself either. 41 years of marriage, and he died in a flannel shirt I'd washed 100 times. My son Daniel was 39 when we lost him. That was 6 months later, September of the same year, and I don't talk about it much because the words still feel like broken glass. Head-on collision, outside of Frederick. A man who shouldn't have been behind a wheel, drifting across a yellow line on a clear afternoon. Daniel left behind a wife, Colleen, and no children. They'd been trying. Colleen had told me once over Easter ham that the doctors said it just wasn't happening, but she wasn't ready to stop hoping yet. So when Colleen showed up on my porch in October with a casserole dish and red-rimmed eyes, I opened the door the way a mother opens a door for the woman her son loved, with both hands, with my whole heart. "Ruth," she said, "I can't be in that house anymore. Everything is him. The coffee mugs, the hallway, his side of the bed. I was thinking." She stopped and looked down at the casserole like she'd forgotten she was holding it. "I was thinking maybe I could stay with you for a little while, just until I figure out what's next. I don't want to be alone, and I don't want you to be alone either." I thought of Daniel's smile. I thought of the way Walter used to say Colleen was good people, which was the highest compliment he gave anyone. I thought about my empty house, the rooms that echoed, the nights I fell asleep in the recliner because our bed had become too big. "Of course," I said. "You come stay as long as you need." She moved in 3 weeks later with 4 suitcases and a border collie named Biscuit. The first month, she was a gift. She cooked. She did laundry. She watched old game shows with me at night and laughed at Drew Carey's jokes. She hung Daniel's framed army photograph in the living room where the afternoon light would catch it. I remember standing in the doorway watching her adjust it and thinking that maybe grief doesn't just take. Maybe sometimes, if you're lucky, it gives you back a daughter you didn't know you were going to need. That was October. By February, the locks had been changed. It started so slow I didn't see it. I want to be honest about that, because in my mind I keep going over it, looking for the moment I should have known. But it wasn't a moment. It was 1,000 small ones, each so reasonable on its own. The first thing was my driving. Colleen said she'd noticed me hesitating at the stop sign on Ridge Road. "Ruth, honey, I'm worried. I saw you this morning, and you just sat there for the longest time. Let me handle the errands for a while, okay? You deserve to rest." She said it with her hand on mine. I nodded, because what's a stop sign against a daughter-in-law's concern? I gave her my keys for the grocery runs, then for pharmacy pickups. Then she suggested we keep the Buick at her mechanic's for a full checkup, just to be safe, because Walter hadn't driven it much toward the end. I never saw that car again. 6 months later when I asked, she said it had needed more repairs than it was worth and she'd had it junked. "I didn't want to upset you," she said. "You've been through so much." Then my phone. She replaced my old flip phone with a smartphone she called Senior Friendly, which had exactly 3 contacts programmed in: her, the doctor, and 911. When the phone stopped working in December, she said the provider had deactivated the line because of a billing issue she was handling. "Don't you worry about it," she said. "I've got mine. Anyone who matters calls me anyway." Then my mail. She built a system where she'd sort it every morning at the kitchen table, reading aloud whatever she thought I needed to hear. "Here's another one of those church mailers. Ruth, you want me to recycle this? Here's a bill from the cable. I'll take care of it. Here's a card from Doris at choir." Oh, that's sweet. The cards I never held in my own hands. The bills I never saw. The bank statements that stopped appearing on the counter, where Walter used to leave them every month. Then my medications. Walter had always been the one to remember my blood pressure pill and my thyroid medicine. After he died, I'd been inconsistent. Colleen saw that, bless her, and bought me a plastic organizer with the days printed on it. Each morning, a little cup of pills appeared next to my coffee. 2 blue, 1 white, a half of a peach-colored one I didn't recognize. "That's your new one," she said the first time I asked. "Dr. Halsey put you on it last visit, for the dizziness." I didn't remember being dizzy. I didn't remember seeing Dr. Halsey. But my memory had been a slippery thing since Walter died. Grief does that, people said. The brain softens to protect itself. I took the pills because she was watching. I took them because she was my son's widow. I took them because the idea that she would give me anything I shouldn't have was more terrifying than the pills themselves, and I wasn't ready to let that idea in. But the dizziness she'd mentioned arrived. It came in the afternoons, a slow tilting of the room, a thick feeling behind my eyes. Some days I slept from noon until supper time and woke up not sure what day it was. Colleen would be at the foot of the bed with a tray of soup, smiling her sad smile, saying, "You went under again, sweetheart. It's okay. Rest is what you need." By Thanksgiving of 2024, I hadn't been to church in 8 months. I hadn't seen Doris, my friend since the Carter administration. I hadn't been to the bank, the post office, the beauty parlor, or a single doctor's appointment that Colleen didn't drive me to and sit beside me for. I hadn't answered my own phone in a year. I hadn't driven a car in longer than that. And then one night, I woke to the sound of her voice. It was maybe 2 in the morning. The house was dark, and I'd gotten up because my mouth tasted like metal and I wanted water. I padded barefoot down the hallway, and I heard her in the kitchen. She was on the phone, not whispering but keeping her voice level and low, the way you talk when you don't want the walls to remember you. "No, she's fine. She's asleep. The afternoon dose knocks her out every time. I'm telling you, she doesn't track. Half the time she can't remember what she ate for breakfast. I've got the notebook going. I'm documenting everything. Cognitive decline, falls, confusion. When we go for the capacity hearing, I'll have 2 years of records." A pause. "No. The house is in her name, but she made me executor last summer. She doesn't remember signing it. She doesn't remember a lot of things. That's kind of the point." I stood in the hallway, in my nightgown, and I did not breathe. The life insurance from Daniel cleared months ago, but there's her annuity, the pension from Walter's union, and Medicare's gonna keep paying as long as she's in home. I just need her to keep sliding. Another year, maybe less. Then I petition for full guardianship, and we're clear. I walked backward into my bedroom the way you walk away from a snake. I pulled the door until it was almost closed, and I sat on the edge of my bed, and I held my own hands so they wouldn't shake. That was the night the fog started to lift. I didn't take the peach pill the next morning. I took it out of my cup and slipped it into the pocket of my robe and pretended to swallow. By afternoon, the tilting feeling hadn't come. My vision stayed sharp all the way through the evening news. I watched Colleen at dinner, and she looked at me the way a farmer looks at a field, measuring. I kept pretending. I had to. I did not know what she was capable of, and I had to assume it was worse than what I'd already heard. Over the next week, I began saving pieces of myself. I hid one peach pill every other day inside an empty aspirin bottle in the bathroom, wrapped in tissue. I wrote down what I'd heard her say, in pencil, on the inside flap of a cookbook called Country Comfort, that she would never open because it had been Walter's mother's, and the binding was falling apart. I wrote Doris's phone number from memory, and the number for the sheriff's non-emergency line I'd seen on a magnet before she'd taken the magnet down. I needed a way out. That was the problem. She drove me to the doctor, and she sat in the room with me. And she answered for me when the doctor asked questions. When I tried to say something, she'd squeeze my knee under the table and say, "Oh, sweetheart, you're getting confused again." And the doctor, who was a nice young woman with tired eyes, would write something in the chart. I wasn't confused. I was gagged by kindness. I was hostage to a smile. The one place she let me go alone, briefly, was the library. Carroll County Public Library had been Walter's favorite building on earth. He'd taken me there on our second date in 1981, and we'd walked out with a stack of books so tall I'd had to carry half. For 40 years I went every Thursday afternoon. Colleen knew that. Everyone knew that. When I finally found the voice to say I needed something that was mine, some rhythm that still felt like Ruth Halverson, she'd sighed like I was being difficult. And then she'd said, "Fine, 11 minutes. I'll wait in the car." 11 minutes. Every other Thursday. I used the first visit to watch, to see what the front desk looked like now, who the librarians were, where the camera was, whether there was a phone I could pretend to use. I couldn't risk running. If I ran and failed, she'd know. And the next day there would be no library, no 11 minutes, no outside world at all. I had one shot, and it had to land. I used the second visit to pick my book. Something thick enough to hide a note, thin enough to fit in Colleen's tote bag, without her questioning why I'd chosen it. Circle of Friends, by Maeve Binchy. I'd read it twice before. She would never. I used the third visit to write the note. I did it at a back table, hunched over, hand cupping the paper. My handwriting came out shaky because I was terrified, not because I was failing. I wrote it 3 times before I got the whole thing said, in a way that sounded like me and not like someone begging. I folded it small. I slipped it between pages 142 and 143. I put the book in the return bin. Then I walked out and got in the Tahoe and told Colleen I was tired. And I went home, and I lay on my bed, and I prayed the way I hadn't prayed since Daniel. Denise found it the next morning when the book came in through the return drop. She told me later that she almost set it aside without opening it. Almost. But something about how it had been tucked into the bin, pages up, the corner of the paper just barely peeking out, caught her eye. She opened the book. She read the note. She did not throw it away. She did not call the police right that second, because the note had said I couldn't call, and she understood that might mean she couldn't either. Not yet. Not without me. She waited 2 weeks. She watched for me. She checked the returns every day, and when she saw my name on a request that came back through, she waited by the front desk, with her hands shaking and her voice steady, and she said, "Mrs. Halverson, can you come back here with me for just a moment?" She'd already called them. Not 911. She'd called a social worker she knew from her church, and the social worker had called a detective who specialized in cases like mine, and between the 3 of them, They had a plan ready by the time I sat down in that chair in the back corner by the large print books. The detective's name was Angela Ruiz. She came in through the side entrance, not in a uniform but in jeans and a cardigan, carrying a library card application, like she was a patron. She sat across from me at a study table and she said, "Mrs. Halverson, my name is Angela. I'm a detective with the county. I've read what you wrote. I believe you. I'm going to ask you some questions, and then we're going to decide together what happens next. You are not going back to that house tonight unless you want to." I cried so hard that a woman at the next table got up and moved. I couldn't stop. Detective Ruiz handed me a tissue and waited. When I could speak, I told her everything. The peach pills in the aspirin bottle, the cookbook with the pencil notes, the phone call I'd overheard, the mail I never saw, Colleen's notebook, which I'd once glimpsed in her nightstand, but had been too afraid to touch, the Tahoe outside that had probably already honked a second time. Detective Ruiz made one phone call and then she said, "We're going to walk out the front door together. A car is going to pull up. You're going to get in the car. An officer is going to speak with your daughter-in-law. You don't have to say anything to her. You don't have to look at her. Is that okay?" I nodded. "Ruth," she said, and her voice was gentle in a way I wasn't used to anymore. "You did something today that saved your own life. Do you understand that?" I didn't. Not yet. But I walked with her to the front door. And Denise was there. And she squeezed my hand as I passed. And I squeezed back so hard, I think I bruised her. Outside, the Tahoe was where I'd left it. Colleen was out of the car, pacing, phone to her ear. 2 patrol cars rolled up behind her. She turned and saw me walking out with a woman she didn't know, and for one single second her face was a face I'd never seen before. Naked, calculating. The mask was off, and what was underneath it was metal. Then she put the mask back on. "Ruth, oh my God, honey, I was about to call the police. I thought something happened to you. She has episodes. Officer. She wanders. She doesn't always know where she is. Ma'am, I need you to step away from the vehicle and put your hands where I can see them." I got into Detective Ruiz's car. I did not turn around. The house on Sweet Gum Lane was searched that afternoon. Under a warrant, Detective Ruiz had sweet-talked a judge into signing before dinner. In Colleen's nightstand, they found the notebook. 2.5 years of daily entries. Dose given 8:04 a.m. Subject slept until 2:30 p.m. No complaint. Subject asked about mail, redirected. Subject mentioned Doris, told her Doris is busy this week. Page after page. My life. Written down like a science experiment, with me as the variable. In the bottom drawer of the desk in Walter's old office, they found the forms. Power of attorney, dated the week after Daniel died, when I was in no condition to read my own name, let alone a legal document. A will, naming Colleen as sole beneficiary. Applications, some approved and some pending, for caregiver stipends, in-home support allowances, and a long-term disability claim filed on my behalf, citing a dementia diagnosis I had never received from a doctor who did not exist. In the medicine cabinet, they found 3 bottles of a sedative prescribed in Colleen's name. The peach-colored pill had been hers. She'd been crushing a quarter of one into a capsule and giving it to me every morning for almost 2 years. In the garage, they found Walter's Buick. She hadn't junked it. She'd parked it behind a tarp and a stack of old patio furniture. The keys were on a hook by the back door, next to her own. The hospital kept me for 3 days because my blood pressure was a mess and my thyroid was out of whack and I was underweight by 14 pounds. Doris came. She'd been writing me letters every other week for 18 months and had been told, through Colleen, that I didn't want to see her, that I was too depressed, that I'd asked to be left alone. Doris sat in the chair beside my hospital bed and held my hand and cried, and for once I wasn't the one crying. The court hearing came in April. Colleen was charged with elder abuse, financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, forgery, insurance fraud, and the unlawful administration of a controlled substance. Her attorney tried the same song. The villains in these stories always try. My client was a grieving widow. My client was caring for her mother-in-law, out of love. Mrs. Halverson's memory is unreliable. Mrs. Halverson signed these documents willingly. I took the stand, and I read from a page I had folded and unfolded in my pocket until the creases were soft as cloth. I said that I had raised a son who chose a woman I welcomed as my own. I said that when he died, I opened my door to her because I believed grief shared is grief halved. I said that I had been wrong, not about opening the door, but about assuming that everyone who walked through it deserved what was on the other side. I said that I was 73 years old, that I had buried a husband and a son in the same year, and that I had not lost my mind. I had lost 11 minutes a week, and I had used them. I said that my name was Ruth Halverson, that my address was 418 Sweetgum Lane, that my phone number I could now recite again from memory, and that I would like the record to show I was the one saying so. The jury was out for 2 hours. She got 14 years in federal prison. The guardianship petition she had been preparing was voided. The forged power of attorney was voided. The will was voided. The applications for caregiver stipends were referred to the Department of Justice for further prosecution. I was awarded restitution that I will probably never see all of, but the court said it, so it is real. I went home to Sweetgum Lane on a Tuesday in May. The locks had been changed back to mine. Doris had come with 2 church ladies and scrubbed the house from baseboard to ceiling. They had thrown out the pill organizer. They had thrown out the notebook. They had hung a new wreath on the front door, a simple green one with a red ribbon, and inside, on the kitchen table, was a casserole from the Methodist women and a card signed by 17 people, including a little note from Denise the librarian that said, "You are always welcome at our front desk. Please come by any time." I stood in my own kitchen, and I cried for a long time, not because I was sad, but because the silence felt different now. For 2.5 years, the silence in that house had been a cage. That afternoon it was just quiet. Quiet the way Walter used to be quiet when he was reading the paper. Quiet the way a safe house is quiet. Quiet the way the world sounds when nobody is watching you. I drove the Buick to the library the next week. First time I'd driven in over 2 years. I parked it crooked because I was out of practice, and I walked inside, and Denise came out from behind the counter and hugged me without saying a word. A month after I came home, I got a letter, postmarked from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. A woman named Josephine, 78 years old, who had seen a short piece about my case in her local paper. Her son's widow had moved in with her after her son passed. She had been, in her words, slipping for a while now, and not sure why. She had read my story and thought to herself, "This sounds too familiar." She had walked to the neighbor's house while her daughter-in-law was out, and she had asked to use the phone. She was staying with her sister now, in Lancaster. She wrote that she wasn't sure she would have had the courage to leave if she hadn't read about me. I sat at my kitchen table, Walter's old table, and I read her letter 3 times. Then I picked up a pen, and I wrote back. "Dear Josephine," I wrote. "A stranger once told me I saved my own life. I didn't believe her at the time. Now I think what actually happened is this. I wrote 11 words in a book, and a woman I'd never met opened it. The courage wasn't mine alone. It never is. Whoever you have to tell them. Whoever has ears, trust them. There is a whole country of us, and we are learning how to listen." I signed it, Ruth, and I walked it to the mailbox myself, in my own shoes, on my own feet, down my own driveway, on a bright afternoon in June. Then I came back inside, and I made myself a cup of coffee, and I sat down at the table where my husband used to leave the bills, and for the first time in a long time, I opened my own mail.